Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to the Privilege Stacking series. And in this series, we are going to be talking more about your privilege. Where does it work and where does it not work? So, when I talk about things like pretty privilege or social climbing and stuff like that, the question you want to ask yourself is what ethnic groups or geographical locations do I get a lot of pretty privilege in? And when I use that term, what I'm saying is compliments about your beauty, special treatment because of your beauty, social status because of your beauty. Do you get a lot of compliments from black men? Okay, so maybe that's an area where your pretty privilege works. But an area where your pretty privilege may not work is if you're around a lot of jealous women. So I've noticed for a lot of pretty women, their pretty privilege does not work in a female dominated workplace if you've got a lot of basic Bettys in there. You know, those jealous older ladies or those ladies that they view you as like their rival, or unfortunately, some unambiguous women who may be jealous of you or resentful because of your pretty privilege. Those are all things that you may want to take note of. And by the way, I know that this isn't this case for everybody, but you want to take note of that. Like, okay, where do I get the most hate for my beauty? Okay, so that's a place where I want to stay away from. So, for example, I noticed that I deal with jealous men. Like for me in the past, part of the reason why I am not the type where I've dated like a bunch of unambiguous mono dark skinned black men was actually because I had received lots of kind of jealousy and humbling tactics or accusations of being bougie or stuck up and stuff like that from a lot of unambiguous men. And so it made me take note of that and be like, okay, so my pretty privilege or my social status is respected by this other group of men. Maybe it's like MLS men, and maybe it's not as respected by black men from the hood. Like I've noticed for me in particular, it was more so black men who were like from the hood, no offense. They were more like, they would try to use these humbling tactics. So that's something you want to take note of. Is there a place where my pretty privilege hinders me? Are there certain types of women who will not like me because I have pretty privilege? If so, I need to stay away from those groups of people. I need to stay out of scenarios where my pretty privilege becomes a danger to me. Like, this is why people tell you to be street smart. Part of what that means is if you have pretty privilege, obviously you don't want to walk around in front of a convenience store with a super short skirt on and hang out outside in front of a bunch of guys who are just lurking there, because your pretty privilege in that scenario may end up causing you to feel like you're in danger. So you want to use that same talking point to yourself, but you want to start to think of it in other areas of your life. So, for example, this is a part of why I say every pretty girl should have her own social media account, or she should be working for herself. She should be her own boss, because I really do believe that the 9 to 5 workspaces, especially if it's a female dominated workplace like nursing, administration, human resources, places like that are places where sometimes your pretty privilege can actually not work, or it can become a hindrance, or it can cause you to have a target on your back. So you want to start asking yourself, okay, where do I receive the most pretty privilege and where does my pretty privilege not work? Because that's going to help me to social climb out of those scenarios. Let's say you live in a neighborhood where people are very poor, but you are privileged financially. Maybe you have a trust fund or you have money in your bank account, but you're just living in that neighborhood temporarily for whatever reason. You want to think about that. Like, okay, my wealth privilege does not work well for me living in this neighborhood because there's a high crime rate. So I have a higher chance of being robbed, or I have a higher chance of people committing fraud. All of these mindsets will help you to stay safe. And then on the positive end, you get to ask yourself, what people groups give me the most compliments? So you can actually separate it up by gender. So for me personally, when I'm choosing friendships, I actually believe in privilege within friendships. You guys know my talking point on this. I believe that everyone is either giving privilege to someone else or they are receiving privilege from someone else at any given time. So you can ask yourself, what types of girls do I have pretty privilege with? What types of girls are like good friends towards me? White girls, are they more encouraging towards me? Do they acknowledge my beauty? Is it black girls that are the most encouraging about my beauty? Is it Asian girls? Is it Hispanic girls? Okay, so do I enjoy being friends with those girls? Okay, so I've noticed that I get along really well with a lot of girls in the Asian community. Maybe you're Blasian, maybe you're black and Asian, and you notice you get along with Asian girls a lot. Okay, well, that's something that you can take into consideration. I have privilege when I am around Asian girls because that's a part of my background. I give them pretty privilege. I compliment them and they also compliment me. There's no rivalry. So this will actually help you to socially strategize your friendships. One of the biggest mistakes and the biggest psychological traps that people will place you in as a pretty girl is they will try to force you or pressure you into proving that you're down to earth, quote unquote. They want you to prove that you're down to earth. They want you to prove that you're nice. And so they'll actually try to pressure you into being friends with people that you may not want to be friends with. Maybe you don't want to be friends with girls who are like ghetto and ratchet. Maybe you don't want to be friends with girls who are super rich and privileged. Maybe you don't want to be friends with certain types of girls. And guess what? You have the right to choose your own friends. You have the right to socially strategize in a way that works for you. And so even when it comes to friendships, you can ask yourself, what types of girls compliment me the most? What ethnic group of girls compliment me the most? What phenotype of girls compliments me the most? And same thing with yourself. Like, what phenotype of girls do I like to compliment and get along with? Which women do I feel the most sisterhood around? Where does my pretty privilege work in terms of friendships? Because I do believe in pretty privilege in regards to friendships, because even with me personally, two of my closest friends, they both do fitness stuff on Instagram, like fitness modeling stuff, and so they have pretty privilege in my opinion. The other girl, she does like health and wellness stuff, so she does like all this vegan stuff, and she's very pretty. She has long natural 4C hair, you know, those beauty YouTubers, those beauty Instagrammers. So I've noticed that I tend to like hanging around other women where I give them pretty privilege, so we all have pretty privilege. And I've noticed that we all have different forms of pretty privilege. So my form of pretty privilege within our friend group is, I guess I have kind of the ambiguous multiracial pretty privilege. And my other friend, she has like this athletic pretty privilege. She's basically an athlete. She's very good at doing her fitness modeling stuff on Instagram. The other friend, she has kind of that vegan, kind of that the earthy black girl form of pretty privilege. So it works out in the friend group because none of us are like the jealous type or whatever. All of us are bougie. I've also noticed that I like to have friends who are bougie and leveled up. I don't like having friends that are super like obsessed with men and they're super pick me-ish and they will ditch you at the bar so they can go talk to a guy. No. So that's something else you want to ask yourself. Where does my pretty privilege work or not work in terms of friendships? Because for me, I want to set it up to where my pretty privilege works universally or where it works in every social scenario. I know it's impossible for every person to think you're pretty or treat you like you're pretty, but what you can do is you can do everything in your power to make sure that all of your friends appreciate your beauty and they compliment your beauty. Oh, well, you're telling girls that you should only be friends with girls who think you're beautiful. Damn right. Hell yeah. Why would I want to be friends with girls who think, oh my God, she's ugly. Oh, she's not shit. Oh, fuck her. No, I have the right to decide what types of friends I want, and I want friends who compliment my beauty because I know that I'm the type of girl that compliments my friend's beauty. I don't like it if I'm having to compliment you 24/7 and then let's say I get dressed up, nobody's complimenting me, or I don't feel encouraged, or I feel like there's this underlying rivalry. I don't like that. And I don't have to prove myself to anyone. So if that means I'm stuck up or, oh, that means you want people to kiss your ass, okay, well then so be it. Because if you view encouraging others as kissing their ass, you are the exact opposite of what I'm looking for in a friend anyway, because I like to stay around environments that are encouraging. So when you are deciding how to socially navigate, you can ask yourself, what types of women compliment my beauty the most? Are they older women? I've had friends before. It's so funny. When I lived in my hometown, one of my closest friends, she was actually in her 80s and we just got along really well. She was like a kindred spirit with me or something. I don't know, but I was always encouraging towards her. I would help her go to the grocery store and stuff. We would cook together. We just became friends because she just vibed well with me and she was very sweet and encouraging. So that's a scenario where my pretty privilege or social privilege worked with that older lady. So you don't have to put rules and boxes around your social circle. You get to decide for yourself, okay, this is the type of friend group I want. I want friends who think I'm pretty. Yeah, I want friends that think I'm pretty because I want us all to be pretty together. I guess that's more of my mindset. I want all of us to be pretty together. I don't want to have to coddle someone emotionally because she feels like she's getting overlooked at the bar, or she gets all pissed off because maybe a guy's talking to our other friend and not her. I don't want those kinds of friendships. And so the way I avoid them is by asking myself, where does my pretty privilege work? Because I want to be friends with girls who think I'm pretty. You can ask yourself the same thing about men or about ethnic groups in general. What ethnic group compliments me the most on my beauty? Is it white men? Is it black men? Is it Asian men? Is it Asian people in general, men and women? When I go to the grocery store, like if I'm in an Asian grocery store, do they compliment me more than when I'm in other stores? And the way you can figure this out is by thinking back on when you have received the most compliments. Well, one thing you can do is you can think about the best compliments you've ever received and then think about who gave you that compliment. Was it a white person? Was it a black person? Was it an older person? Was it a child? Because for some people, you are very privileged around children. You're very magnetic. Have you ever been around like those teachers when you were in elementary school where you just love your teacher? She's so magnetic. She's very fun and like sweet and nice. Maybe you have privilege and a lot of children think that you're nice and pretty and sweet, and maybe you like working with children. So there's nothing wrong with going where you're celebrated. And on this video, I'm talking specifically about where your beauty is celebrated and going specifically into scenarios where you know you will have social status. So I understand that a little bit of stereotyping might be happening here, but you kind of have no choice because unfortunately we live in a society where people are going to also be stereotyping you. And so you have the right to make the judgment call on what situations you want to be in. So if I don't want to be at a convenience store at 1 a.m. and there are a lot of guys hanging out outside of the store, yes, I am definitely stereotyping, but I am just trying to stay safe. It's nothing personal against those guys. Also, when it comes to pretty privilege, you get to ask yourself, what kind of pretty privilege do I want? So, for example, I enjoy having fashion pretty privilege when it comes to my female friendships. And so I've noticed that all of my closest friends, they are fellow fashionistas. And I noticed that we all end up complimenting each other on our style. Like one of my friends, the athletic one, she has these cute athleisure clothes and she's younger than me. She's in her 20s still. And then the other one, who's also in her 20s, she wears like these very strappy dresses, like shoulder straps and cute stuff like that. She wears like the low buns with the claw clips. And so she is a fashionista in her own way. And then my other friend, the earthy one, she wears these beautiful locks, like the faux locks and the high puffs. And she wears like these beautiful African prints. And then my style is more like very pink and bright. And I wear like little cute matching outfits and short sets and like a matching crop top with like pink pants or stuff that you wouldn't normally see. I'm just very different in the way that I dress. And so I've noticed that with female friendships, I enjoy having pretty privilege in the sense of fashion. And so I like to think to myself, what types of women, what ethnic group of women, what scenarios have women complimented my fashion to the point where it helped me to make friends? And I've noticed as far as my fashion goes, usually it is bougie black women. That's the best way I can describe it. I've noticed that's where I have like pretty privilege. I consider fashion privilege to be a part of pretty privilege because it's your body, you know, your body or your skin tone, those colors on your skin tone, the clothing on you. So I've noticed bougie black women or like very classy leveled up black women who are also fashionistas. Those are the types of women where I have fashion privilege with them. And I've also noticed non-black women who are at the gym or they're very into sports and stuff like that. That's another area where I get a lot of pretty privilege in terms of fashion because when I go to the gym, other girls in the yoga class, like usually they'll be Hispanic or Asian or East Indian, they'll be like, oh, I love your matching set. Oh my gosh, I love your little yellow shirt. So that's another area where I have privilege. So now I know if I want to make friends, I can get in spaces where there are going to be bougie, fashionista black women, because that's where I would feel a sense of status because I'm around other women who also have that privilege so they can appreciate it in me. Or I can go around women who go to these bougie gyms that I like to go to, these bougie yoga classes and Pilates classes. That's an example of noticing where your pretty privilege works and where it doesn't work. And I also want to talk about using pretty privilege with women because I feel like a lot of people, whenever I talk about pretty privilege, they think that I'm only talking in terms of dating. That's actually not what I'm talking about. Something else you can actually ask yourself is, where does my pretty privilege work the best in terms of my job? I've noticed that for me, usually my pretty privilege would work the best if I was in some sort of service job, like bartenders, barista, something where I'm like kind of facing the public, customer service type of thing, working in the fashion industry somehow, working at a makeup counter, doing people's hair or something like that. Those were areas where my pretty privilege worked, but the pay, that did not work. And so I decided that I think I would work best if I'm just working for myself and I just talk about pretty privilege online. That is the best option for me. So you can ask yourself, what types of job scenarios does my pretty privilege work the best in? Something else that used to work a little bit better was working in male dominated fields, but then the problem was, you're in a male dominated field. And if he tries to hit on you or he tries some bullshit and then you say no, then you've got a whole other host of problems. So that's another social strategy you can use, is asking yourself, what job fields or what type of job does my pretty privilege work in? And then what type of job does my pretty privilege not work in? For example, I've noticed that if I work around a lot of older, overweight women, or if I work around a lot of leveled down women, so women who are just not leveled up, then my job experience is going to be horrible. My pretty privilege will actually work against me in those scenarios. And I'm going to have people sending emails about me saying that I'm dumb or like trying to pretend like I'm not doing my work. I've noticed that is where my pretty privilege does not work, is in an environment where there are a lot of overweight women for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because of my body shape. Maybe I trigger them because I'm into fitness. I don't know. But for whatever reason, there just happens to be a pattern that no matter what race they are, usually if I'm in an office with majority overweight women, generally speaking, they're not going to like me. Or if they're leveled down, meaning like they don't do their hair or makeup, they don't prioritize their own appearance, they're not going to like me, generally speaking. And I'm not saying this so you can just think negative or put everyone in a box, but I do want you to start making this a part of your social strategy. And then the same thing goes with just your everyday life. Like, where do you receive the most compliments? Not at work, not at school, but just when you're out and about. Do you receive compliments in coffee shops? Because I know for me, I like to go to the coffee shop not just because I love coffee, but it's partially because I tend to receive compliments in coffee shops. So, as far as the reason why, I think part of it could be some of my clothing. So, I do have a coffee shop wardrobe. Oh, maybe I'll do a video about that as well. How to use your wardrobe to increase your pretty privilege. I have a video about that on my members page, but I haven't talked about that strategy publicly on YouTube yet. But I've noticed that coffee shops is an area where my pretty privilege works very strongly. Oftentimes the baristas are extra nice to me. Usually they compliment my outfits, they compliment my hair, or like just restaurants in general. I think part of it is because the culture is a culture of like kind of talking to the customers. So maybe that's why it works. And maybe it's because I am naturally a little bit more smiley. And so they feel comfortable complimenting me. So you should ask yourself, okay, where do I get compliments out and about? Do I get compliments on the train? Do I receive a lot of pretty privilege walking down the street? Do I receive pretty privilege when I am in the grocery store? That's another common place that I've noticed I will receive pretty privilege. Usually the checker at the grocery store, or sometimes like a guy. I don't know why there's always a guy in the produce section specifically, but like in Whole Foods by where they have the pizza or where they have all the juices, sometimes there might be a guy over there shopping or lurking. I've noticed that like Target and Whole Foods, those are two areas where I get a lot of like compliments. So grocery stores, that's something else you can ask yourself. Do I get a lot of compliments in Walmart. So for me personally, you guys know that I have beef with Walmart. Why? Because I've noticed that I have a lot of haters in Walmart sometimes. Like some of my worst experiences with people being rude to me or yelling at me have unfortunately been at Walmarts or at soul food restaurants. And I've told a couple of the stories on here. So that's a note to self though. So in terms of social strategy, I never went back to that soul food place again, even though I love their food. I decided, okay, from here on out, I'm not going to go inside of that soul food place. I will just order online. Like I'll order from DoorDash or from Uber Eats if I want that particular soul food instead of going in there and potentially getting yelled at. So now I have socially strategized in order to minimize my stress. And by the way, when I say social strategy, all I mean is you're staying away from social situations that cause you stress or it causes you anger. So to this day, I don't like going to soul food takeout places for the most part. I usually do not go in those types of places. If I want some soul food takeout, I will just order it and have it delivered because I understand my social strategy. I know that if I go into soul food restaurants, which are usually owned by older black women, sometimes they've had a history, well, multiple times, unfortunately, there's been a history of them saying stuff like, you ain't speak to nobody, that sort of thing. And so, because I don't want to deal with that, especially with the way that I speak too, I don't want to like deal with that or go back and forth with people. So, I will just be at home and I'll just order my stuff. I'll order in. So, that's something else you can ask yourself. What types of restaurants do I get compliments in? Do I get compliments at restaurants or am I invisible at restaurants? Because the way to know whether your pretty privilege works or doesn't work is based on things like maybe compliments, people smiling at you, people prioritizing you. And then the way that people will know if their pretty privilege is not working is if people are automatically rude to you, they are hating on you, they're straight up antagonizing you, they're accusing you of being stuck up, they will exclude you, they will make you feel invisible, whether it's purposeful or not purposeful. That means your pretty privilege is not working in that scenario. And so, what I'm trying to do here in the Pretty Girl Club is help you guys to get out of these scenarios where your pretty privilege is not working, because that's what I call pretty girl problems. It's when you are pretty and you have pretty privilege, but you're in the wrong environment. You're in an environment where your pretty privilege does not work for you. So a lot of you guys, when I talked about my HBCU experience, a lot of you guys were like, oh, did you like it? Like, I would never go to an HBCU. That would suck. Well, even though my pretty privilege did not work with all of the black women at my HBCU, my pretty privilege worked fantastically well in every other area. So it worked well with like some of the MLS men or even the unambiguous men, even though I didn't really talk to them like that. It worked well with the upperclassmen girls who saw me as like their little sister. So the only place at that HBCU that my pretty privilege did not work was really just with a lot of the unambiguous girls in my class, so they were also freshmen or whatever, and they didn't like me. But generally speaking, everybody else in all those other scenarios, my pretty privilege was still working in my favor. So you can also weigh the pros and the cons. Like, okay, if I work at this particular company, I'm probably going to have some haters, but I'm going to have majority good experiences. So one thing that I've actually done in the workplace is I decided to start working at larger companies because I knew that pretty much any 9 to 5 job that I go to, there are going to be some basic Bettys there. There are going to be some women who, I'm telling you, they every single time almost, they happen to all be overweight, no matter what race they are. For the most part, they're either my age or maybe a lot older. And so I know that if I work at a big company, I'll have basic Bettys, but then I generally will still have privilege with people from the other departments. And so if I have a bad experience in one department, I can transfer to another department. I can transfer to another building or something, and then I can still work there. So that's a way of kind of strategizing. Where does your pretty privilege work? Where does it not work? Where do you receive social status? So now I guess we can talk about men. This is more of a decentering men style channel. That's why I don't ever start my videos talking about men in the first 5 minutes. I wait until I'm about halfway done to talk about men or something. But when it comes to men, where does your pretty privilege work with men in terms of ethnic groups, in terms of socioeconomic status? What type of man compliments you the most? Do you get a lot of compliments from white men when you're walking down the street? Where do you get those compliments? Are you at the store? Are you on the trail? I know that for me, I've gotten a lot more compliments from white men when I'm either on the trail or when I'm at Whole Foods because that just happens to be the place where I happen to run into guys or something like that. And I'm not going there specifically for that, but I'm just saying if I were to look at my privilege or status, those are some scenarios where I have status with that particular ethnic group. Something else you can ask yourself is what types of men celebrate me the most in social settings? So, are you the type of girl where you can go to a bar and some guys will come and sit up next to you or something like that? Do you like that? Do you not like that? Because that's something else you can decide as well. Do I like it when a guy comes up and sits next to me, or do I prefer a different flirting style? Because when it comes to things like flirting or compliments, each type of guy or each group of guys, they may have a different flirting style. So let's say you are a millennial like me. What type of flirting style or what type of pretty privilege do you have with millennial men? Do you have privilege with millennial black men, millennial Asian men? Do you have more privilege with Generation X guys, like older guys, boomers, I don't know, super old guys? Do you have more pretty privilege with the young guys in their 20s? That is something else you can ask yourself. What types of places do I get the most compliments? And another thing you could ask yourself is what type of pretty privilege do I want? What types of compliments do I like the most? Do I like compliments on my beauty, like my physical beauty, like, oh, you're so beautiful? Do I like those types of compliments? Because I've noticed for me, the beauty compliments, that tends to happen more when I'm at work for whatever reason. Like when I was working those different jobs, whether it was accounting or something else, usually if a client would come in, then he would compliment my beauty or something like that. Not all the time, but that was a scenario where my beauty would get complimented, like my face. Or are you the type who likes to get compliments on your hair? Like, what is your favorite part of yourself that you like being complimented on? Because I know for me, I like being complimented on my fashion. I like being complimented on my physique, like my body and stuff, because I feel like I work hard on myself. And I like being complimented on my beauty, like my face, hair, all that good stuff. So that's something else you can ask yourself. What type of pretty privilege do I want? What types of compliments do I want? And what scenarios can I put myself in to the point where I am more likely to receive those types of compliments? And then, in terms of social status or being put on a pedestal, so it's still a form of privilege, where do I feel like I receive that status? So, for example, I feel like I receive a lot of status and privilege whenever I go to these dance workout classes. So, I've noticed that I get more compliments on my outfit and stuff when I'm at like Pilates or yoga or more of a laid back class. But then I get more compliments on my personality and my pizzazz when I'm in a dance class because I've noticed that in Zumba and salsa classes and my Bollywood dance class, that is a form of showing off your personality, or at least it comes off like people, they like my personality because of my dancing style. I can tell because they will literally tell me. They'll be like, oh, you're such a good dancer, or oh, you're so good at doing the salsa. You can do the salsa so fast. Or they will, one time I told you guys about how even one of the teachers, she was actually the teacher of the salsa class. She was my age and she asked me to go out for tacos with some of the other girls at the gym. So I've noticed that if I'm in a dance class, the type of privilege I have is different. The privilege I have in dance class is more around my personality and my dancing as opposed to my outfits and my beauty in the yoga class. So those are all different types of pretty privilege. So that's why I say you get to make it fun and you can ask yourself, okay, what do I like being complimented on? Or what area do I want to try to improve my privilege in? Because I actually feel like privilege is something that is attainable. So whenever I talk about privilege, I'm not talking about it like, oh, I have pretty privilege and you don't, and you're just trash. No, I'm not saying it like that. I'm saying it like you can decide, do I want to level up my looks? Do I want to level up in my personality? Do I want to gain some social skills and learn how to make friends in a new city? Because you can actually put yourself in scenarios where you will have those opportunities. Something else I like to do if I want personality privilege or social privilege, like friendships and stuff, is I will sing along with the song. Like in the dance class, if one of my favorite songs comes on, I'll start singing along, or I might be like, woo, or like clap my hands or something, or like just do something silly. And I've noticed that I receive positive attention from the women in the class. They'll be like, oh, you're so much fun, or it was so much fun watching you dance. You always make me like really want to get my workout on. So that is still a form of privilege. That's still a form of status. Also, in my last video on this topic, I talked about the different types of privilege you may receive based on your geographical location. And now I want to talk about it on an even smaller level. What exact buildings and businesses and companies do you get the most compliments in? So, do you get more compliments at the grocery store? Do you get a lot of compliments at the gym? Do you get more compliments at the bar or at the bike shop? I don't know. What types of places do you go to a lot? Because that's another thing. Do you even go anywhere? Because what's the point of having all of this privilege? What's the point of being this beautiful girl inside and out, being this vivacious woman full of life if you're not enjoying that? If you're not enjoying the friendships, you're not giving yourself the chance to make friends or to start hobbies. So that's another thing you want to ask yourself too. Like, is there something I could do to open myself up or to give myself the opportunity to make friends? One of the most simple ways that I've seen girls using their privilege, actually, I've done this myself, is in my apartment. I literally have privilege in my apartment, not just pretty privilege, but also social privilege because I go to the gym at my apartment. I am always like checking my mail. I don't just let my mail pile up. I talk to the people at the front desk. I've seen some other girls where they will like hang out by the pool at the apartment. They'll read their books and stuff. I have walked up to girls at the gym and complimented them, like, oh my gosh, I love your workout set. Like, where did you get that from? And she'll be like, oh, I got this from Amazon. And then I will start a whole conversation. That's literally how I made friends with one of my neighbors. We follow each other on Instagram now. It was because she had on a cute outfit. She was a fellow exotical. And so you guys know my method. I give pretty privilege to other women who have my phenotype or other women that I think are pretty and stuff. So I complimented her, and then we ended up like following each other on Instagram. So that's a form of privilege. That was a form of social privilege. And I also received compliments as well. So I have privilege even within my own apartment building. So, what kinds of places do you frequent? Is there a way that you can get out more and be seen? Because if you live in an apartment or if you live in some sort of shared living space, then the easiest way is you can just go hang out in the business center. Go do your work downstairs at the business center instead of just doing it in your apartment. You can go and record your next YouTube video out at the pool, or you can walk your dog at the dog park or something like that because you're going out and you're being seen. Something else you can ask yourself is what colors contribute to my pretty privilege? Like, do I get a lot of compliments when I am wearing pink because it looks good on my skin tone? Do I get a lot of compliments when I'm wearing red lipstick? Do I get a lot of compliments on my natural hair texture? Like, I've noticed that I get a lot of compliments on my hair just across the board. Black people, white people, I've noticed they notice my hair or they'll be like, your hair's so pretty. Whether I'm wearing it fake or real, you guys know when I wear fake hair, I tend to wear some sort of leave out or something like that. So maybe I'll be wearing a ponytail or something that's still showing my real hair. So it's not like this huge wig that's like covering my whole forehead or anything. But that is something you can think about. Like, okay, what features do I get complimented on the most? Do people compliment my complexion? Do people comment on my nose or my eyes? Maybe you have like a nose ring or something like that. Maybe you have an eyebrow piercing. Do people compliment those? Do people compliment your tattoos or your hair color? Maybe you dyed your hair like purple or something like that. Is that something that has increased your pretty privilege? Where does your pretty privilege work? Does your pretty privilege work in the bougie neighborhood? Does your pretty privilege work more in the hood? Does your pretty privilege work more in the Midwest, more in the South, more in the corporate setting? I've noticed that my pretty privilege, as far as grabbing attention or having people look at my outfits, I've noticed in the corporate world, I would get a lot of attention for my outfits because I love the fashion aesthetic of corporate outfits, like the button-up shirts and the pencil skirts and stuff. That's one of my favorite types of outfits to style. So I get a lot of fashion attention, but then the actual pretty privilege doesn't work if there are basic Bettys there because they are triggered by that. They're triggered by me wearing like this Elle Woods bright pink suit into the office. So you can ask yourself, does my pretty privilege work when I'm wearing a suit? Does it work more when I'm wearing certain colors? Do I get more compliments or more positive attention when I wear my hair a certain way? And I think it's so funny how some women are so obsessed with like super straight hair. But maybe if they get a lot of attention that way, then, you should keep wearing your hair straight. But I've noticed for me, when my hair is natural or like more natural looking, or my extensions are just, it's just my natural type 3 hair texture, just in a ponytail or a bun or a braid or something, then that's when I actually get a lot of compliments. Basically, when I have kind of this effortless appearance as opposed to this super glammed up, super contoured appearance. But that's just for me, though. For somebody else, maybe you get more pretty privilege with the contour, supermodel, chiseled cheekbones, or something like that. So that's another thing that you can ask yourself. Okay, where does that super chiseled makeup look? Where does that gain me pretty privilege? Where does my pretty privilege work? And where does it work against me? Where does it work? Where does it not work? What types of friendships allow for me to have pretty privilege? Are there certain types of women that I should not be friends with because they don't like when I have pretty privilege? Okay, so now I know to avoid those types of women in social settings. And this is not to be mean, this is literally just self preservation. Like, if you have more pretty privilege around white girls, and let's say your friends are white girls and you get along well with white girls, they celebrate your beauty, they celebrate your hair texture, your skin tone, your phenotype, and they like it, and you feel like you have pretty privilege in that friend group, then stay in that friend group and don't let people tell you you're acting white. That's something that people used to tell me when I was a teenager, because some of my friends happened to be white, but it was just because of the hometown I grew up in. It wasn't because I purposely was like, let me try to make friends with these people. No, that was just based on where I was from. But I noticed that some of the black girls that I knew from my church, they saw my Facebook pictures where I was with white girls, like hanging out on a boat. And they were like, oh, you're trying to be white. You just want to be friends with white girls. All your friends are white girls. You hang out with all white people. And it's like, I hang out where I'm celebrated. I hang out with people that vibe well with me. It's not based on their race. But if a certain race treats me well, and I feel respected amongst that people group, or if I feel celebrated and I feel beautiful and privileged within that group, then I'm going to stay in that group, or I'm going to hang around those people that celebrate me. So that means my friendships, I want to be celebrated in my friendships. I want to be celebrated at my job. I want to be celebrated on the internet. Let's say you have a YouTube channel or an Instagram or something. I want to be celebrated in basically everywhere that I go, because why not? Oh, you just want people to kiss your ass. I'd rather have people celebrating me than people treating me like trash. I'm not going to walk around and be invisible so I can prove to you that I'm humble. But if you have certain locations or certain ethnic groups where you feel the most celebrated around, or if you have a certain grocery store where every time you go to that store you get a compliment, if you have a certain gym that maybe you used to be a member of and you always got compliments there, but then you stop going to that gym, start going back to that gym again and start going to the places where people are noticing you, where you are being treated special, where you are being prioritized. Maybe you receive pretty privilege amongst your family. Are you the baby of the family? I feel like the babies of the family are so spoiled. I'm not the baby, I'm the oldest. But maybe you're the baby in your family and you feel very celebrated around your family members because you are mommy's little girl or your daddy's little girl. You want to stay in these spaces where you feel the most cherished and places where you feel loved. And if you're one of those people who is thinking, oh, I don't feel celebrated anywhere, okay, well, that means you probably don't go anywhere. That means you probably don't get out much at all. And so you have to remember there are billions of people in this world. There are thousands of different coffee shops, parks, things to do, and there are thousands of different ways you can be celebrated. So you want to start off by celebrating yourself and picking up some hobbies for yourself. And trust me, eventually somebody's going to notice you. Somebody is going to compliment your work. Let's say you join a pottery class and you're really good at pottery. Someone's going to eventually notice. They're going to celebrate you. They're going to compliment you. Even if it's just the teacher, that is still a form of micro validation. I talk about this all the time, the importance of micro validation. You want to have a good combination of validating yourself, but you also want to have some form of external micro validation. I recommend that your micro validation is not male centered. I recommend that you have many sources of validation. Men can be one source, but I don't think they should be the only source because men are very fickle and, disloyal and stuff. So you want to have some other sources of micro validation, like your job, the grocery store could be one, the coffee shop that you go to. And I think it's really important to be sure that you are getting micro validation every single day if possible. And if you can't, then you can start off maybe once a week and then maybe build your way up. That's why I try to tell you guys to start your own YouTube channels, even if it's faceless, because when you get views or comments or people validating your opinions, that is a form of micro validation. And it was free. You know, you started your channel for free and you just come on here and talk your shit and you get your privilege, you get your exotical tax. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comments section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.